Hallo und herzlich willkommen. Hello and welcome to the 21st edition of the International Literature Festival Berlin. And welcome to this reading and conversation with Etgar Keret, Stories About Stories. Hello, Etgar.
Hi.
And this other young man on stage is Barnaby Metschurat, who will read some of the stories in German. And who am I talking here? I'm Aida Baghernejad. I'm a cultural journalist, culture writer, and I'm very excited to be the host or presenter, moderator for this evening tonight. And yes, I'm so excited to be here on stage with the two of you and with all of you here. And you can probably hear this event is going to be mostly in English. However, the stories read will be in German. So, and there will be a little bit read in Hebraic, if I'm not mistaken. In Hebrew.
In Hebrew. Yeah.
Sorry. Etgar Keret is an Israeli author of short stories, as many of you sitting here probably know, but also of film and musical scripts, comics, and basically everything you can possibly write. Etgar, you are also a professor for Israeli literature and creative writing, and you also seem to have an issue with authorities, judging from what you told me in our conversation a week ago in preparation of this, which I thought was very impressive. And you're also the main protagonist of a beautiful documentary about yourself, which I am excited to watch, but couldn't find to watch legally, and I'm German, so I would never do something illegal.
I'll send you a link if you want.
Please do, because the trailer, I watched it 5 times, and I was laughing very hard. And you also write a newsletter that I can recommend every single one of you to read, Alphabet Soup, but I think we're going to speak about all of this during our 60 minutes together. But my first and main question is, you recently moved to Berlin with your whole family. What brought you here? And even more important, is Berlin treating you right?
Yeah, well, I came here for a year. I have an academic sabbatical, and my son really wanted, as he put it, to be challenged. He felt that during Corona everything was too easy and that he was stagnating, and he said, I want to go to different places and meet different people and study in a different language. And I said, sure. And now he's already regretting it because it's more difficult than he romanticized it to be. And with me, it was really like a huge change because I have this joke that I always say to my students that I'm like Immanuel Kant, only without the brains, because all my life I've been living in a diameter of 4 kilometers. I lived in 4 apartments. The one that I live in now, I've lived in it for almost 30 years. And so I never move, I never change anything. I go to the same cafe, I go on the same route. So for me, the idea of moving to a different country is a huge change. And I feel that it made me much more aware of things, you know, because when you are drinking in the same cafe for 40 years, you don't ask yourself what tree do you have next to it, or if it's noisy or not noisy. You're already used to it. And now when I'm in a different place, everything feels like the first time. And of course, like most of my interactions here were wonderful, but with me, and you know, it's not nice that I'm saying it, but I say it anyway. You know, I'm son of Holocaust survivors, and I come from Israel. So the idea is like that when you come to Germany, things are not neutral, and it's not a question of blame. You know, it's just a question of kind of an instinct. You know, when you hear the word Achtung, then it's not like if you hear a word in Spanish and you react to everything. And it's funny because in my newsletter I have this column where I write about Berlin. It's called first we take Xanax and then we take Berlin, you know, and what I'm writing now is really that I went with my wife to a spa, a beautiful spa here. And when we went to the spa, they kept talking to us about the regulation, and they said, you have to stay naked. You can't wear a swimsuit. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can't wear a swimsuit, but you have to keep your mask. So you have to keep your mask, but you're not allowed to wear a swimsuit, okay? And they give you, and because you're naked, they give you this bracelet, and they say, this is your number. You should always have the number on your arm, okay? Always have the. And so the idea is that I know that they're meaning well, but the idea for me, you know, as son of Holocaust survivor coming here, and when people say you have to stay naked and the number has to stay on your arm, you know, then it's like, I mean, it's not a nice thing, but I told my wife all the time, I said, the spazzies are coming, the spazzies are coming, you know, it was really like kind of a, but in general, I think that I come from a place that is so chaotic that the idea of seeing a society that respect order and respect the system and see how the system works and how it makes life so much less stressful, you know, it's really. It's like my son said, it kind of takes you out of your comfort zone and it teaches you a lot of things. You know, many things that you would think that, you know, that they have some kind of a romantic value. When you come to Germany, you see that people do it otherwise, and it actually works 10 times better.
But I mean, that's kind of similar to the pandemic in a way that shocked all of us and caught us out of our usual life. And I don't want to romanticize it, but it was, I mean, the effect was kind of similar, looking at life from a different perspective. And you also made a film, a short film about it.
About the pandemic, yeah. What I felt basically with the pandemic is that nobody was as prepared for the pandemic as short story writers.
Why that?
No, because the idea is that when you're a short story writer, the way it happens is you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, what am I going to be today? Oh, I'm going to be a pedophile chef on a cruise ship. And then you write a story about it. And that's what you are for today. And I think that what happened with the corona is people woke up and said, what are we going to be today? We're going to be a chef. Okay, I'm going to take some recipes from the YouTube. We're going to be bodybuilders. Yeah, I'm going to do some push-ups, you know. So people had to kind of invent their identity, and they couldn't use the force of inertia. And for me, it's the default. This is what I do every time. It's not even like novelists that decide about a word and a character, and they live with this character for 4 years. With me, usually, my relationship with a story word, it's for a few days, and then I have to find out what's going to be my next setting. And I think that this was a very good preparation for COVID. And I was saying to people who, you know, sometimes people are kind of jealous of you when you're an artist, you know. They say, oh, we want to be poor too. And no. So when they're jealous of you, I said to those people, you see, you know, I'm not eating honey here, you know. You see, it's difficult. It's difficult to try and stay connected and to make an active decision of what you want to do in any given time and not have this kind of social flow that takes you. Because I think that, you know, in times when there are not corona, I would say that 90% of the decisions that we make, we don't make them. We just think that we make them. You know, we get up in the morning, we drop our child in school, we buy something in the supermarket, we go to work, we do what we're supposed to do. And the idea is that with the corona, suddenly you have to take 10 times more decisions because all those decisions that were taken for us were out. You know, all the time that we had to use on the tram or on the I don't know, going somewhere and returning, then suddenly we have this time. So what do we do with this time?
What you just said about short story writers being best prepared reminds me of, well, you basically write visions that become realities. And to me, writing is, as a non-fiction writer, a journalist, writing is a way to create realities. And you create rather absurd ones, and I, as a journalist, often quite depressing ones. And one story that you suggested that should be read tonight is from your most recent publication, Fly Out Already, and it's really interesting. Its German name is Tu's nicht, don't do it, whereas the English name is Actually Do It. And it refers to the same story, but I don't want to spoil.
The name is Do It and not Don't Do It?
Well, in English, it's Fly Already, which I think
no.
is...
So it's funny because Fly Already is, we couldn't, it's a title that was suggested by the New Yorker editor of the story, and I couldn't take it to Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's also called Don't Do It. Because in Israel, in Hebrew, the term fly already is a slang for fuck off.
Oh.
Like ta'uf kvar, you know, so because you cannot use it, then it's strictly the English title, but it's not the title in any other place.
Oh, I thought this would tell us a little bit about the cultural difference between the States and Germany, but maybe not. But anyway, I mean, the story you suggested, The Fungus, really deals with this theme of creating a world through writing. And having read these two books from yours, I feel like that's a topic you deal with a lot, writing in itself, the meta topic of writing. Why is it something that you can't stop writing about?
Well, I think that the basic situation, or let's say the position of a writer in this world, is something that is very weird for me. You know, it's the word fiction. It's come from the same root as fictitious, which is something that is not positive. And basically, what you do as a writer, then you have this agreement with your readers that you're allowed to lie. You know, you make up characters that never existed, and they're in settings that never happened, and you expect people to be sad when those people die, and there is something totally ridiculous in the premise, you know, to begin with. So whenever I write a story, I think that on one level, I follow a story and I'm fascinated by the story, and on a different level I'm saying, why am I doing this? What the hell is going on, you know? And I think that in most of my story, that other questions that I'm asking myself, they put a lot of energies into the story, but the reader cannot notice them. They're very personal. While in a few stories, those things come to the surface. Like there is one story in this collection. I just remembered it because I did a Zoom 2 days ago about the guy I wrote a story about. It's a story called Todd. And the story called Todd, it's a true story. I was in an event in the US, and this young, handsome guy who was an event arranger, he said, you know, I read your stories, I'm a big fan. I want you, please, to write a story about me. And that it will be a story that girls that would read the stories will understand that I'm very, very special and a good guy, and they would want to sleep with me.
I love that one, by the way.
and I tried writing this story. It's called Todd because the guy was called Todd. And I tried writing the story. You know, it didn't come out. I'm not sure, you know, how it works, but it's really me trying to write this story for this guy. And the funny thing was that this story was published in the US and became very, very viral. And this guy was very, very happy with it, and he said, it's really, I asked you to write a story, and you write a story, and now everybody read the story, and it's amazing. But he changed his name. and he's not called Tad anymore. So it was really, so if we talk about the effect of literature, it was really, really strange, because here was this guy, and he said, do your weird stuff, it's going to affect my life. And I say, I'm not sure I can. He said, no, come on, give it a try. And I said, okay, I tried. And he said, it's a beautiful story. It didn't affect my life, but I changed my name. So, so I don't know. I think the relationship between art and the realities are always very interesting.
Indeed it is, and I would suggest we hear a little bit of the fungus, and first you read a paragraph in Hebrew.
Yeah, so I read the paragraph in Hebrew. I just want to say, the honest disclosure is that the reason that I've asked to pick this story it's because it's the shortest one in the book, and I wanted us to have a lot of time to speak and answer questions. And I read the first paragraph, and it goes like this. פטריה. האיש הרזה נפל על רצפת בית הקפה. הבטן שלו כאבה יותר משחשב שבטן יכולה לכאוב בכלל. וסדרה של התכווצויות לא רצוניות הרעידה לו את כל הגוף. ככה זה בטח מרגיש כשהולכים למות, הוא חשב. אבל לא יכול להיות שזה הסוף. אני צעיר מדי, הוא חשב. ומביך מדי למות ככה, במכנסיים קצרים ובכפכפי קרוקס על רצפה של בית קפה, שפעם היה טרנדי וכבר שנים מתקשה לסחוב. הוא פתח את הפה כדי לצעוק לעזרה, אבל לא היה לו בריאות מספיק אוויר. הסיפור הזה הוא לא עליו.
Der dünne Mann fiel auf den Boden des Cafés. Sein Bauch schmerzte schlimmer, als er je gedacht hatte, dass ein Bauch überhaupt schmerzen kann. Und eine Reihe unfreiwilliger Spasmen erschütterte seinen Körper. So fühlt sich das sicher an, wenn man gleich stirbt, dachte er. Aber das kann doch nicht das Ende sein. Ich bin zu jung, dachte er. Es ist zu peinlich, so zu sterben. Mit kurzen Hosen und Crocs-Pantinen auf dem Fußboden eines Cafés, das früher einmal trendy war und sich schon seit Jahren nur noch mühsam über Wasser hält. Er öffnete den Mund, um Hilfe zu rufen, doch er hatte nicht genug Luft in den Lungen. Diese Geschichte handelt nicht von ihm. Die Bedienung, die zu dem dünnen Mann hinging, hieß Galia. Sie hatte nie gedacht, dass sie einmal Bedienung sein würde. Sie hatte immer davon geträumt, mit Kleinkindern zu arbeiten. Aber durch die Arbeit mit Kindern ist kein Geld zu verdienen und beim Bedienen schon. Keine Riesenmenge, aber genug, um die Miete und noch ein bisschen was dazu abzudecken. In diesem Jahr hatte sie angefangen, Sonderpädagogik am Beit Berl College zu studieren, und an den Tagen, an denen sie Unterricht hatte, machte sie die Abendschicht im Café. Am Abend verirrte sich nicht mal ein müder Hund dorthin, und sie verdiente weniger als die Hälfte von dem, was sie an Vormittagen verdiente. Aber die Ausbildung war ihr wichtig. »Alles in Ordnung mit Ihnen?« fragte sie den Mann auf dem Fußboden. Sie wusste, dass nichts mit ihm in Ordnung war, aber sie fragte trotzdem. Diese Geschichte handelt auch nicht von ihr. »Ich sterbe«, sagte der Mann zu ihr. »Ich sterbe, rufen Sie einen Krankenwagen.« Sinnlos warf ihr ein braunhäutiger, behaarter Typ zu, der an der Bar saß und eine Börsenzeitung las. »Es dauert eine Stunde, bis die Ambulanz kommt. Wegen den Kürzungen im Betrieb arbeiten Sie heute bloß noch im Schabbat-Modus.« Während er das sagte, stand er auf und lud sich den Dünnen auf den Rücken. »Ich bringe ihn in die Notaufnahme. Mein Auto steht draußen geparkt.« Er machte das, weil er ein guter Mensch war und wollte, dass die Bedienung das sah. Er war frisch geschieden und etwas an ihrer phlegmatischen Art bezauberte ihn. Er war mindestens 10 Jahre älter als sie, konnte sich sie beide aber gut zusammen vorstellen. Diese Geschichte handelt auch nicht von ihm. Auf der ganzen Strecke zum Ichilov-Krankenhaus waren Staus. Der Dünne, der hinten im Wagen lag, stöhnt fast unhörbar und sabberte dem Behaarten die Polster des neuen Alpha Sports voll. Nach der Scheidung hatten seine Freunde gesagt, er müsse den Mitsubishi im Familienformat in etwas anderes umtauschen, den Wagen eines Junggesellen. Mädchen erfahren eine Menge über einen anhand des Autos, das man fährt. Ein Mitsubishi besagt, kaputter, Geschiedener sucht Xantippe, die den Platz des vorigen Miststücks einnimmt. Ein Alpha Sports dagegen klingt mehr nach toller Typ, geistig jung geblieben, sucht Abenteuer. Obwohl auch dieser Dünne, der sich jetzt bei ihm hinten auf dem Rücksitz krümmte, eine Art Abenteuer war. Der Behaarte dachte sich, jetzt bin ich praktisch wie ein Rettungswagen. Ich habe keine Sirene, aber ich kann alle anderen Autos anhupen, dass sie den Weg freimachen. Ich kann Kreuzungen bei Rot überfahren wie im Film. Während er das dachte und das Gaspedal fast bis zum Anschlag durchdrückte, fuhr ihm von der Seite ein weißer Renault-Lieferwagen rein. Der Fahrer des Renaults war religiös. Der Fahrer des Renaults war nicht angeschnallt. Der Zusammenstoß tötete ihn auf der Stelle. Diese Geschichte handelt auch nicht von ihm. Wer war schuld an dem Zusammenstoß? Der Behaarte, der beschleunigte und das Stoppzeichen ignorierte? Der Fahrer des Lieferwagens, der nicht angeschnallt war und ebenfalls schneller als zulässig fuhr? Bei diesem Unfall gibt es nur einen Schuldigen. Warum habe ich diese ganzen Figuren erfunden? Warum habe ich einen Kipperträger getötet, der mir nichts getan hat? Warum habe ich einen dünnen Mann, der überhaupt nicht existiert, Schmerzen zugefügt? Warum habe ich die Familie eines dunkelhäutigen, behaarten Mannes zerstört? Weil man jemanden nur erfunden hat, entbindet einen das nicht von der Verantwortung für ihn. Und im Gegensatz zum Leben, in dem du die Achseln zucken und zum Himmel hinaufdeuten kannst, gibt es hier keine Ausrede. Du bist der Himmel. Wenn dein Held scheitert, ist das nur deswegen, weil du ihn hast scheitern lassen. Wenn ihm etwas Böses passiert, ist das nur deswegen, weil du ihm Böses wolltest. Du wolltest ihm dabei zusehen, wie er sich in seinem Blut wälzt. Meine Frau kommt ins Zimmer und fragt, schreibst du? Sie möchte etwas fragen, etwas anderes. Ich sehe es an ihrem Gesicht, aber gleichzeitig will sie mich nicht stören. Sie will es zwar nicht, aber hat es schon. Ich sage zu ihr, ja, aber es sei egal, dass aus der Geschichte nichts wird. Dass es überhaupt keine Geschichte ist, eher ein Juckreiz, ein Pilz unterm Fingernagel. Sie nickt, als ob sie verstehen würde, wovon ich rede. Tut sie nicht. Was nicht heißt, dass sie mich nicht liebt. Man kann lieben, auch ohne zu verstehen.
Thank you both. Etgar, you said something to me in our preparation when we met to prepare this conversation that really lingered with me, that imagination and art have the power to make sense of the world. How can it help us make sense of the world, especially a world that is such a mess right now?
Well, I think, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about imagination is my father. My father survived the war by staying in hiding in a hole that his parents dug in the ground, and they stayed in that hole for more than 600 days. And I asked my father as a child, what did you do in this hole? And he said, well, I had this rule that every day I would imagine a different parallel universe. You know, for example, a world where everything was the same, only that the Nazis were after red-headed girls. And they wouldn't bother anybody who... And then I would imagine how I hide the red-headed girls in my basement and protect them. And then the next day I would say, okay, no, it's a different world where Nazis, they look for Jews, but when they find them, they give them candies. And then it will be a story about how they give me candies, and I share them with people who were not lucky enough to be Jews, you know, and don't get candies. And And I said to him, but why did you do that? And he said to me, because the moment that you can imagine something else, then you feel that you kept your freedom. Because you stay in a reality, but the moment that you can imagine that a different reality exists, it means that there is a choice, even if this choice is only in your mind. And I really think that the true thing about art is that we live inside some kind of a frame that tells us this is our life, this is reality, this is the thing, the way we do things, this is the thing in which we not supposed to do things. And the moment that somebody can imagine something that hadn't happened, I don't know, social structure, a kind of relationship, or an action that wasn't taken, then for me it feels as if it makes the world slightly wider. And also I think that there is something about art that many times they take things that basically are in our life, but that we don't have the word to articulate them, or we can't even differentiate them, from the background they're in. For example, I don't know, it's like if you look at the term Kafkaesque, then I think bureaucracy existed, long before Kafka wrote about it. And the way that we use now the term Kafkaesque, it basically means that art helps us kind of define something in our mind that was part of our life, but we just felt bad, we couldn't kind of dissect it or kind of see the parts in it. So I really feel that it's a little bit like, I don't know, if it's as if like if we are living inside our lives, then there is something about art that kind of helps us look at the things that we're doing from different angles, and sometimes look at things that we usually don't look at all when we live our lives.
But you published your first collection of stories in 1992, so almost 30 years ago. How has your approach to art and your style of writing changed throughout this time? Because you basically write in literally every genre I can imagine.
Well, for me, creating, or I don't know, writing or engaging in art was always much easier than living my life. It's really, I think that it's almost kind of like a bypass way. It's really like if I would be more in life, then I would do something, but I'm not, then I'm going to write a story about it. It's basically, it's really like, it's almost like a plan B. I always tell my students that the most beautiful love poem written in the history of literature are about a failed love. Most of the Shakespearean poems are about somebody who loves somebody that she's either dead or doesn't love him back, And when you think about it, it makes much sense, because if you love somebody and he or she loves you back, then you're too busy to write a poem. You're making love to somebody you love, But if you don't, then the only way to close the gap between what reality serves you and what you yearn for, the only way to acknowledge the emotions in your mind is basically by imagining and by sharing with people your ideas.
Is this yearning the reason why all your stories, while being incredibly funny and absurd, also have this deep melancholy in them?
Yeah, I think in any of my stories, deep inside, there's always some kind of a complaint in its core. It's really
complaint at the state of the world.
Yeah, it's something like I think that let's say if everything works, then there is really no urge to create an alternative reality. It's really I think that the moment that you write a story, you always write a story about something that bothers you, or something that saddens you, or something that doesn't work. Because if it's just bliss, then for me at least, I don't have the urge to write it. If I eat a cake and it's really tasty, I would offer you a bite. I wouldn't write a story about how tasty it is. But if I eat a cake and it's really, really tasty, but you have to get vaccinated 7 times before you can get a bite, then I probably will write a story about it, because there will be some kind of inner frustration and something that, that I wouldn't know how to articulate only through a story.
I think it's quite interesting that you also started a newsletter, which this mode of writing from the early days of the internet has become so prevalent again. And in your newsletter, there's again, I think, a different style of writing. Why did you start it? Why did you decide to basically also jump on the bandwagon and hark back to the 90s, the internet of the 90s?
Yeah, well, I must say that, that I'm so low-tech that, that I didn't know what a newsletter was before I started writing one, So the thing about it is, to be honest, that it had to do with the fact that I knew that I'll be moving to Berlin for a year. And because in Israel I have some kind of a protective system, because I teach in the university, I give many lectures, I have all kinds of commitments, I got all kinds of aunts and uncles that I have to go and visit, and I was afraid that I go to Berlin that I become a bum, it's really like it's like, I'm...
It happens to a lot of people here.
Yeah,
We all get a little bit lazy. We go to clubs too much.
Yes, you wake up late, you have a drink, you take a nap, And I was really, really afraid of that. So I thought to myself, if I do a newsletter and I'll commit in it that I write and that I publish 3 times a week, then I'll have to write 3 times a week, And that was really the motivation behind it. But what I discovered is that there is something about the newsletter that, like, unlike Facebook, that in Facebook, because I'm political, I'm not political, like, I'm human, so sometimes things piss me off and I write about them. Then what I discovered in the Facebook model is that many times there were many strangers in my page, like people that just came because I said something left-wingy, then Facebook started sending all kinds of right-wing people so somebody will fight with somebody and all this kind of stuff. Then in a newsletter, you really build a community. The people that go there, they don't get there by mistake. They want to read you. And at the same time, it's intimate and it's just a mail. So, for example, for the first time, I started publishing poetry. I'm 54 years old. I never published poems. So now, like, once every few weeks, I write a poem. And it's funny, the people write to me, you don't write poems that well. It's like your stories are really good, but your poems suck. And I say, yeah, but it's just an email. If you ever write a bad poem, you can email it to me. I don't ask you to buy a book or anything. You don't have to read it even. It's just a nice illustration. And I think that this is kind of freedom that, that I can write a piece about everything is something that is great. And I have also kind of all kinds of interaction with the reader. For example, I have a project where people who subscribe to the newsletter, they offer me an idea for a story. They could either like send me a photo or draw something or write a sentence or give a premise, and every month I promise that I take one of those suggestions and I write a story out of it, and it could be really bad, and I dedicate the story to the person who gave me the idea, and I have all these kind of things, like people who do some special things in the newsletter, then I name characters after them. But so it won't be as if like, that I'm kind of selling out. Then I usually name kind of characters of people who are demented and dying, or of a dog that got run down by a car. But still, it's named after them, So it's kind of, it allows you to do all those or to have this kind of freedom that sometimes you don't have in a book form. Like I love the book form, and I think that nothing will replace it, And I'm the kind of those old people that don't read on digital. Or my wife has this, I don't even know how they call it, from Amazon.
The Kindle.
Kindle, yeah,
Evil one.
Yeah, no, it's not evil, but it's for me, like I like those heavy books in my bag and say, well, I brought so many of them. And I don't know, I like the physical quality of it, but there is something about this kind of the word of the newsletters that it offers, I can read a story and send it on audio. I can ask a question and people answer me. I collaborate a lot with people in the newsletters that I send them pieces and they prepare their artwork, so they do their illustrations. So it's, especially in a year like this, that it's kind of, it's not a lonely year, but it's a year in which I decided to live in some kind of solitude. It's really, I don't teach here, I have very few interactions with people. Then this idea of having some kind of a supportive community seemed like a good idea.
But now we go back to the actual print book and to the story on the cover. I think in the night I had prepared a much smarter way of connecting the conversation to the reading, but we'll skip that and maybe read the story in the night from Tu's nicht.
Good, great.
Yes.
It's the second shortest story in the book.
In der Nacht, wenn alle schon schlafen, liegt Mama mit geschlossenen Augen wach im Bett. Früher als Kind wollte sie Forscherin werden. Sie träumte davon, ein Mittel gegen Krebs zu finden, gegen Grippe oder Weltschmerz. Sie hatte gute Noten und sehr ordentliche Hefte. Und abgesehen davon, die Menschheit zu retten, wollte sie auch ins All fliegen und einen Vulkan in Aktion sehen. Man kann schwer sagen, etwas in ihrem Leben sei schiefgelaufen. Sie hat den Mann geheiratet, den sie liebte. Sie hat auf einem Gebiet gearbeitet, das sie interessierte. Sie hat einen süßen, kleinen Jungen gekriegt. Aber trotzdem kann sie nur schwer einschlafen. Vielleicht, weil dieser Mann, den sie liebt, vor einer Stunde aufgestanden ist, um zu pinkeln und nicht zurückgekommen ist. In der Nacht, wenn alle schon schlafen, geht Papa barfuß auf den Balkon, um eine Zigarette zu rauchen und seine Schulden zusammenzurechnen. Er schuftet wie ein Ochse, versucht zu sparen, aber irgendwie kostet alles eine Spur mehr, als er hat. Der halslose Mann im Café hat ihm schon einmal etwas geliehen. Demnächst wird er mit der Rückzahlung anfangen müssen, wobei er keine Ahnung hat, woher nehmen. Nachdem er die Zigarette fertig geraucht hat, schnippt er den Stummel wie eine kleine Rakete vom Balkon runter und sieht ihn funkensprühend auf dem Gehsteig zerschellen. Es ist nicht schön, auf der Straße Müll zu hinterlassen, sagte er zu seinem Sohn jedes Mal, wenn der Kleine eine Eis- oder Süßigkeitenverpackung auf den Boden wirft. Aber jetzt ist es schon spät und er ist todmüde. Und außer dem Gedanken an Geld hat er nichts im Kopf. In der Nacht, wenn alle schon schlafen, hat der Junge erschöpfende Träume von einem Zeitungsblatt, das ihm am Schuh klebt und das er nicht loswerden kann. Mama hat einmal zu ihm gesagt, Träume seien der Weg des Gehirns, sich selbst etwas zu sagen. Aber das Gehirn des Jungen spricht nicht deutlich. Und obwohl dieser lästige Traum jede Nacht wiederkehrt, mit dem Geruch nach Zigarettenrauch und modrig abgestandenem Wasser, gelingt es dem Jungen nicht, irgendwas herauszulesen. Er wälzt sich im Bett herum und weiß tief im Innern, irgendwann werden Mama oder Papa hereinkommen und ihn zudecken. Und in der Zwischenzeit hofft er, dass, wenn er es geschafft hat, dieses Zeitungsblatt vom Schuh abzustreifen, falls ihm das wirklich gelingen sollte, endlich ein anderer Traum kommen wird. In der Nacht, wenn alle schon schlafen, steigt der Goldfisch aus dem Aquarium und zieht die karierten Hausschuhe von Papa an. Dann setzt er sich auf das Sofa im Wohnzimmer und säppt sich durch die Fernsehkanäle. Am liebsten sieht er Zeichentrickfilme und Naturfilme, auch ein bisschen CNN, wenn Anschläge oder Unfälle geboten sind. Er schaut sich das alles ohne Ton an, um niemanden aufzuwecken. So gegen 4 kehrt er ins Aquarium zurück. Die nassen Hausschuhe lässt er mitten im Wohnzimmer stehen. Es ist ihm egal, dass Mama morgen früh deswegen eine Bemerkung zu Papa machen wird. Er ist ein Fisch. Und außer dem Aquarium und dem Fernseher hat er nichts im Kopf.
To me, this is such a Etgar Keret story because it's so absolutely surreal, but I almost, while reading, didn't catch its surrealism because it's so, you write it so normalized. You create this world where this goldfish just zapping through TV is absolutely normal. How do you, or let me phrase this in another way, do people sometimes mistake you for the personas you develop, for the father in the story, the family in the story, the goldfish maybe?
I don't know if they mistake me for it, but if they see a connection between me and them, they're not mistaken at all, because, you know, I think I'm very much the goldfish in the story. Like, you know, really, like I don't get along when I'm outside of water, and I tend to be sometimes indifferent, and I'm insomniac, so I'm awake when everybody else is asleep, you know, so there are many fish-like qualities in me.
At the same time, it's you currently put yourself out of water moving to Berlin.
Yeah. It's again, you know, I think it's funny because when our son wanted us to go somewhere and to, you know, to have this experience, then it felt very intimidating for me. But then I realized that I live very protective life in my own life. But the truth is that I go to my adventures when I create. And when it's like the place I feel safest on is a stage or a film set or a theater stage. It's because what I feel is that when I'm there's always already some kind of an agreement that everything can happen, and that whatever will be done is kind of under these rules of some kind of a creation. Where in real life, you know, I can say something to people and I can offend them, or I can go beyond the rules. And let's say if I look at my projects, then I think my last big project was a TV series that my wife and I had shot for Arte France, called The Middleman. It's with Metschurat, the French actor. And the thing is that we wrote it in Hebrew. It was translated to French. We directed it in French. We don't know a word in French. I played in this series, me and my real brother in real life. We played the two anti-Semite Polish alcoholic caretakers in an elderly home. And I don't know how to act, and I don't speak Polish, and I was on a set where everybody spoke French, and I don't speak French either. And it never felt in any way intimidating, because it's like, you know, it's here we are people, we're imagining, we're speaking, you know. If I say on the stage something that is not funny, then you won't laugh, but you would never, I don't know, slap me or call your brothers to beat me up, which is something that often happens to me when I'm off stage, you know. So I guess that all my out of water adventures, I usually confine them to making some kind of a project. I want to say that I just remembered that just before coming here, I played a 10-year-old child in a musical.
No offense, you don't quite look 10 years old.
Well, the director said that I'm short and that I have big front teeth, which is a good thing, you know. But I'm saying, you know, I'm not 10-year-old. I can't sing. I don't know how to act. But somehow, if people say you just have to be on stage and do what we tell you, then it kind of feels much safer than if you told me, you know, buy the right ticket for the tram, you know. Because if you don't buy the right ticket for the tram, they stop you, they fine you, they, you know, I don't know, they do stuff to you. If you're supposed to say your line on stage and you say something else, then no, you know, people would say next time say the line, you know, but nobody would really care.
But you just mentioned that sometimes people want to beat you up off stage, or they feel you are rude, which brings me to a question I'm really looking forward to your answer is, how does your writing impact the people around you? One of your books, 7 Good Years, is, for example, not published in Israel because your son forbade it.
Yeah.
So how does your writing affect your loved ones and maybe strangers too?
Well, I think that the great thing about fiction is that fiction is really, you know, in fiction I'm as honest as I can be, but whatever I expose are basically raw emotions, you know, so I can write a story about full of fear or stories that is full of aggression, but the reader will never be able to put it into context. You know, the reader will never know who I was hating or who I was attracted to or who I was afraid of. And with nonfiction, it's trickier because with nonfiction, you write about reality. So for example, the 7 Good Years, that it's basically a memoir about the 7 years between the birth of my son and the death of my father. With my parents being Holocaust survivors, the idea of feeling that you are part of a lineage, that you can show your child to your parent was some kind of a fantasy or yearning that they found it difficult to fulfill. And when I wrote it, then basically my son said, you know, I don't want I don't want my teachers to read it. I don't want my parents' friends to read it. He said, I don't see any advantage in the place where people know more about me than I know about them. And he was like 8 years old at the time. So this is kind of guy that you know that is going to be a corrupt politician one day, you know. And I think that there is a big difference for me between writing nonfiction and writing fiction, because when you write nonfiction, then you really, I tell you a strange story. They had this section in the New York Times called the Lives, where people would write just stuff that happened to them in their lives, and I would write for them from time to time, and it would also be kind of a way to make a living, because you know if you put it, they pay you for it, and it's also fun. And I would write those things, and then. One day, my wife said to me, you know, I have this relative in Buffalo, in the U.S., that she just called, and she said that you wrote about my miscarriage, you know, that we lost our baby. And I said, yes, I wrote about it. And she said, but don't you understand that now people are calling me and they're asking me about the miscarriage? They didn't know about it. And I said, but it's a story, it's in English, and she said it's in the New York Times. You know, people read the New York Times, and you write my name, and then they call me. And for me, it was really like a good lesson, you know, as a fiction writer, because as a fiction writer, I write about my wife all the time. But nobody knows it's my wife, because in the story, it could be an elderly man, you know, going through the park, and he could say something that my wife had said. But when you write nonfiction, then automatically, and sometimes people don't like the way that you characterize them, so it's much trickier.
The story you picked from the 7 Good Years is a very tender one about love and care, but also in a way an incredibly political story, I find. you told me that your goal for this year is to not talk about, your year in Berlin is to not talk about politics, and I want to honor that. I think
No,
it's better for everyone's mental health probably to have a year of politics, but you are such a political writer without being overtly political, which I think is so impressive.
No, but I can say something about this. I think, first of all, I don't like the dichotomies that people have saying some writers are political and some writers are not political. I think that politics is basically made of our most basic emotions. You know, I mean, when I see right-wing extremists, then I see hatred. You know, when I see sometimes politicians acting in a different way, I see that they're motivated by guilt, you know, and a need to reconcile with their past or whatever. So I'm saying that for me, many times when people talk about political writings, they talk about writings that has a bottom line, because unlike art, politics has ends. You know, politics is really, it's from the word polis in Greece, and it's based like deciding if the sewage system will go through this street or that street, or if they're allowed to take the garbage at 4 a.m. or not. It's something very, very practical and reductive. And I don't like the reductive aspect of politics. I don't like the idea that I write a story, and when you read the story, you suddenly love people of all races, or you'll be nicer to people of the opposite sex. You know, I think that the stories don't act this way, and that the fact that they don't have to act this way, this is where the power comes from. I always tell my students, you know.
Our time is running out.
Sorry. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I'm so sorry, but no, I think we should have a listen to this beautiful story that you selected.
Pastrami. Die Luftschutzsirene erwischt uns auf der Autobahn auf der Fahrt zum Haus von Shiras Vater, nördlich von Tel Aviv. Shira fährt an den Straßenrand, wir steigen aus und lassen die Badmintonschläger und den Federball auf dem Rücksitz liegen. Lev hält meine Hand und sagt: Papa, ich bin ein bisschen nervös. Er ist 7 und 7 ist das Alter, in dem man es nicht cool findet, über Angst zu reden. Daher benutzt man lieber das Wort nervös. Gemäß der Anweisungen des Heimatschutzkommandos legt sich Shira an den Straßenrand. Ich sage Lev, dass er sich auch hinlegen soll. Aber er bleibt stehen und seine kleinen, verschwitzten Hände klammern sich an meine. Leg dich schon hin, sagt Shira und hebt ihre Stimme, damit man sie über das Sirenengeheul hinweg hören kann. Er tut es nicht und auch ich bleibe stehen. Wollen wir Pastrami-Sandwich spielen? Frage ich Lev. Was ist das? Fragt er, ohne meine Hand loszulassen. Mama und ich sind Brotscheiben und du bist eine Pastrami-Scheibe und wir müssen, so schnell es geht, ein Pastrami-Sandwich machen. Los, zuerst legst du dich auf Mama. Lev legt sich auf Shiras Rücken und umarmt sie so fest er kann. Ich lege mich auf die beiden und presse die Hände gegen die feuchte Erde, um sie nicht zu erdrücken. Das fühlt sich gut an, sagt Lev lächelnd. Pastrami sein ist das Beste, sagt Shira unter ihm. Pastrami, rufe ich. Pastrami, ruft meine Frau. Pastrami, ruft Lev, entweder aus Freude oder aus Furcht, mit zitternder Stimme. Papa, schau, da krabbeln Ameisen auf Mama. Pastrami mit Ameisen, rufe ich. Pastrami mit Ameisen, ruft meine Frau. Igitt, ruft Lev. Dann hören wir den Knall. Laut, aber weit weg. Wir bleiben noch lange aufeinander liegen, ohne uns zu bewegen. Meine Arme fangen an, weh zu tun, weil sie mein Gewicht halten müssen. Aus dem Augenwinkel sehe ich andere Fahrer, die auf der Autobahn gelegen haben, aufstehen und den Dreck von ihren Kleidern klopfen. Ich mache mich ebenfalls ans Aufstehen. Leg dich hin, sagt Lev. Leg dich hin, Papa. Du machst das Sandwich kaputt. Ich lege mich noch 1 Minute hin und sage, okay, Spiel vorbei, wir haben gewonnen. Aber das ist schön, sagt Lev. Können wir noch ein bisschen so bleiben? Wir bleiben noch ein paar Sekunden so. Mama ganz unten, Papa oben und Lev und ein paar rote Ameisen in der Mitte. Als wir schließlich aufstehen, fragt Lev, wo die Rakete ist. Ich zeige in die Richtung, aus der die Explosion gekommen ist. Es klang, als ob sie nicht weit von unserem Haus explodiert ist. Oh, sagt Lev enttäuscht. Jetzt findet Lahav wahrscheinlich wieder Stücke. Gestern kam er mit einem Stück Eisen von der letzten Rakete in die Schule und darauf stand das Logo der Firma und der Name auf Arabisch. Warum musste sie so weit weg explodieren? Besser weit weg als in der Nähe, sagt Shira, während sie Sand und Ameisen von ihrer Hose putzt. Am besten wäre es, wenn es so weit weg ist, dass uns nichts passiert, aber nah genug, damit ich ein paar Stücke finde, sagt Lev. Am besten wäre Badminton auf der Wiese von Opa Jonathan, sage ich und öffne die Tür zum Rücksitz des Autos. Papa, sagt Lev, während ich ihn angurte, versprich mir, wenn es wieder eine Sirene gibt, spielen du und Mama wieder Pastrami mit mir. Das verspreche ich, sage ich. Und wenn es langweilig wird, bringe ich dir bei, gegrillten Käse zu spielen. Toll, sagt Lev, und nach einer Sekunde fügt er ernsthafter hinzu, aber was, wenn es nie mehr Sirenen gibt? Keine Sorge, beruhige ich ihn. Ich glaube, mindestens eine oder zwei gibt es noch. Und wenn nicht, sagt Shira vom Vordersitz, spielen wir ohne Sirenen.
I'm so sorry I had to cut you off.
No, but I want to say something about this because I think it kind of brings us to a full circle from what we talked in the beginning, because I think that we don't always get to choose the realities we live in, but we do get to choose the story we want to tell about the realities we live in. So if you have to be in a missile attack, you have to be in a missile attack, but you don't necessarily have to get to subscribe to a certain narrative or a certain conduct, or because one thing that you often see in Israel, because there are missile attacks, is that it's almost legitimate that the moment that there is an attack, you can shout at your children. Because the moment there is an attack, you say, get down now, you know. So I say, like, but can't we say that we're together and that we're in danger and that we don't shout at each other? We can, you know. This is the choice that we have. You know, the missile is going to explode one way or another, but the ways that we behave while it's in the air, it's still our choice.
That are some very wise words to end this event, and I'm wondering whether we have a little bit of time for questions from the audience. No, we don't. So I can suggest that all of you go and buy Etgar Keret's books at the Dussmann table outside, where Etgar will also be, and sign some books, and you can ask your questions there. But thank you so much for these wise words, Etgar.
Thank you, and thank you, Barnaby, for the wonderful reading, and for you for hosting it.
Thank you.
Thank you.